My name is Luella. The courtroom fell into a stunned silence as the judge's gavel struck sharp and final. This court finds the will valid and binding. All assets of Henry Thompson's estate, including Thompson Enterprises, the mansion on Elmwood Lane, vehicles, and accounts are awarded to Luella Thompson, effective immediately. Mrs. Thompson is ordered to vacate the property within 7 days. The echo of that gavel felt like thunder in my chest. Across the room, Vivian, my step-mom, collapsed into her chair, pale and trembling. The same woman who had smirked at my grief on the day of the funeral now looked hollow, her power stripped away. A week ago, I was a girl on the verge of losing everything, and now I was the rightful heir to a vast fortune. I remember the day of my grandfather's funeral like it was yesterday. The cemetery was eerily silent, the only sounds being the soft whispers of mourners and the gentle rustle of leaves. Vivian, with her overpowering perfume that seemed to choke the cold air, leaned close to me and hissed, "Luella, don't expect a cent from your grandfather's will." Her words hit me like a sledgehammer, and the mourners gasped as if she'd physically struck me. I refused to cry. Instead, I stood there, the funeral program crumpling in my fist, and walked away before my rage could break through my grief. But then, just as I reached the edge of the grave, the lawyer's voice cut through the whispers. "Actually, there is one more item left." Vivian's smile vanished in an instant. My heart stopped. What could my grandfather have hidden from her and saved for me? Grandpa, Henry Thompson, was a titan in the business world. He was the mastermind behind Thompson Enterprises, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate that had built skyscrapers and shaped the city's skyline. But to me, he was so much more. He was the only person who ever made me feel truly safe. When I was 12, my parents died in a tragic plane crash. Grandpa stepped in without hesitation. He didn't just give me a room in his mansion on Elmwood Lane, he gave me a home. He filled my life with love, guidance, and hope. I recall sneaking into his study at night. The air was thick with the scent of cedar and the faint smell of his old pipe. His sleeves would be rolled up, and his gold watch would glint beneath the soft glow of his banker's lamp. He'd tap the chessboard with a sharp eye and say, "Luella, the knight is a tricky piece. It can move in unexpected ways, just like life. You have to be strategic and adaptable." He wasn't just teaching me chess. He was teaching me how to navigate the complexities of life. On summer afternoons, he'd pull me outside to the garden, ignoring Vivian's complaints about getting dirty. We'd kneel in the soil, planting tulips, and he'd smile at my mud-streaked face. "The earth is our foundation," he'd whisper. "It gives us life and reminds us of our roots." Vivian thought it was a waste of time, but to me, it was a precious moment of connection and love. Every Christmas, Grandpa hosted charity events for underprivileged children. He would kneel down to talk to them, his eyes shining with pride. To those kids, he was a hero, a lifeline. To me, he was a living example of how strength could be combined with kindness. Vivian, on the other hand, only saw Grandpa as a means to an end. To her, Henry Thompson was a walking ATM, a ticket to the high society life she craved. One day, when I was 17, she told me, "You're just a burden he took in out of pity." I was heartbroken. I locked myself in the library and cried into the pages of his books. But that night, Grandpa found me. He sat down beside me and said softly, "Don't let her words define you, Luella. You carry my name, and that name represents integrity, strength, and compassion. That's more powerful than her envy will ever be." On the day of the funeral, as I stood at his grave, those words echoed in my mind louder than Vivian's venom. My grief was starting to turn into determination. Vivian thought she had buried both my grandfather and my future in that grave. She thought I would just walk away quietly, a forgotten girl with nothing but memories. But she underestimated the lessons Grandpa had taught me. I knew how to fight without raising my voice. When I returned to the mansion that evening, the sky was dark and heavy rain clouds were rolling in. I hoped that stepping through those massive oak doors would bring me some comfort, as if a part of Grandpa was still lingering in the air. Instead, my heart sank. 3 suitcases were neatly stacked on the marble steps.
Mine.
My initials were stitched into the fabric. My life reduced to a few pieces of luggage. The front door creaked open, and there was Vivian, draped in a silk robe, holding a glass of champagne as if it were a trophy. Her smile was pure poison. "Oh, good, you're back," she purred. "Save me the trouble of sending someone to drop these at a motel." I stared at her in disbelief. "You can't be serious. This is my home. Grandpa wanted me here." She leaned against the door frame and sneered. "Correction. It was his home. Now it's mine. And you're an uninvited guest." I tried to step past her, but she blocked my way. "Please," I whispered. "It's been 1 day since the funeral. Let me stay until I figure out where to go." Her eyes glinted cruelly. "Did you not hear me at the cemetery, sweetheart? You won't get a cent, not even a roof over your head. Your room was a courtesy, and that courtesy ended with Henry's life." She set her glass down and pulled a manila envelope from the console table. "Here's the agreement your precious grandfather signed. Temporary residency for Luella Thompson, terminated upon his death." The porch light caught Grandpa's signature at the bottom. My chest ached. Could he really have written this? My hands shook. "You forged this," I snapped. Vivian laughed sharply. "Think whatever you like, but the law will side with me. And if you're not gone in 15 minutes, security will escort you off the property, like the squatter you are." Her words cut through me like a knife. My throat burned, and my eyes stung, but I refused to break down in front of her. I bent down, grabbed the handle of one suitcase, and said, "You think you've won, but Grandpa never lost a battle in his life. He won't lose this one either." With that, the heavy doors slammed shut behind me, and one by one, the mansion's lights blinked off, as if she were erasing me from every corner of the life I'd built there. I dragged my suitcases down the long driveway, the rain plastering my hair to my face. My old, dented car was a far cry from the luxury cars in the garage, but it was mine. As I stuffed the suitcases into the trunk, I whispered through clenched teeth, "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." I found myself at the Riverview Motel, which smelled of cigarettes and bleach. Room 203 had peeling wallpaper and a flickering fluorescent light that made my skin crawl. I sat on the faded bedspread, my hands covering my face, and finally let the sobs come. "Why, Grandpa?" I whispered. "Why would you leave me with her?" Just then, the rotary phone on the nightstand rang, shrill and startling. My heart lurched. Nobody knew I was here. I picked up the phone slowly. "Luella," a calm voice said. "This is Mr. Harrison. Your grandfather left instructions. He thought of everything, and trust me, all is not lost." Those words became my lifeline. Every night, as I lay awake in the motel bed, Mr. Harrison's words replayed in my head. He thought of everything. All is not lost. The morning of the will reading arrived faster than I expected. I dressed carefully, pressing my only black suit with the motel iron. I tied my hair back and put on a touch of lip balm. I didn't need glamour, I needed strength. As I buttoned my jacket, I looked at myself in the cracked mirror and whispered, "Walkin' like you belong. Because you do." Mr. Harrison's office building rose into the skyline, a modern masterpiece of glass and steel, just like the buildings Grandpa had designed. My palms were sweating as I entered, but the receptionist greeted me with a knowing smile. "Ms. Thompson, Mr. Harrison is expecting you." Those words felt like a small victory. Vivian might have thrown me out of the mansion, but here, my name still carried weight. The conference room on the 30th floor smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh coffee. Mahogany bookshelves lined the walls, and a breathtaking view of the city stretched beyond the windows. I took a seat at the far end of the long table, my heart pounding. Vivian was already there, dressed like a queen. She was wearing a sleek black suit, pearls around her neck, and her nails were painted a bright red.
She didn't even look at me until I sat down.
Then, she curled her lips and murmured, well, you actually showed up. Brave but useless." I said nothing. Silence was my shield. A few moments later, the door opened. Mr. Harrison entered, silver-haired and carrying a stack of folders under his arm. His calm presence filled the room like a gentle breeze. Behind him were Mr. Jenkins, Grandpa's long-time business partner, and Mrs. Harris, the housekeeper who had been with our family for years. They nodded to me gently before taking their seats as official witnesses. Mr. Harrison settled at the head of the table. His voice was steady and measured. Thank you all for being here. Today, we honor the wishes of Henry Thompson. Every word in this document was his own. My duty is to ensure they are carried out without interference. Vivian adjusted her posture, crossing her legs and exuding arrogance. I noticed her attorney sitting beside her, a sharp-faced woman with a leather briefcase. They looked so confident, as if they were already celebrating their victory. I clenched my fists under the table, feeling the weight of every moment leading up to this. But then I remembered Grandpa's words about the knight on the chessboard. I took a deep breath and waited. Mr. Harrison began to read the preamble of Grandpa's last will and testament. I could feel the shift of power, slow and silent, like the first tremors before an earthquake. To my beloved wife, Vivian Thompson, Mr. Harrison read, I leave the residence on Elmwood Lane, including its furnishings and art. I also leave her my vehicles and all joint bank accounts held at Citibank. Vivian's smile bloomed, smug and poisonous. She turned her head slightly and whispered, See, nothing for you. I stayed still, remembering Grandpa's lesson about the power of silence. Mr. Harrison continued. There was a long pause, almost theatrical. Those were the preliminary bequests, but Henry Thompson was a thorough man. There are additional provisions. The atmosphere in the room changed. Even Vivian's attorney sat up straighter. Mr. Harrison lifted his glasses and read with gravity, To my granddaughter, Luella Thompson, who stood by me with loyalty and love, I leave 50% of Thompson Enterprises, including all voting rights, shares, and dividends. The room fell into absolute silence. My breath caught. 50% of Thompson Enterprises was worth billions of dollars. My hands trembled under the table. I looked at Mr. Harrison, expecting to see a mischievous glint in his eyes, but he only nodded calmly. Across the table, Vivian's nails dug deep into the armrest. This is absurd, she snapped, standing up. She's just a girl. She doesn't know the first thing about running a company. Mr. Harrison didn't flinch. Mr. Thompson's intent was clear. He entrusted Luella with his legacy. Her lawyer tugged at her sleeve, whispering for her to calm down, but Vivian's voice only grew louder. This is fraud. She manipulated him when he was weak, dying. Before I could reply, Mrs. Harris leaned forward. Her quiet voice cut through the tension. I saw Mr. Thompson working on this will with my own eyes, Vivian. He was strong and clear. He knew exactly what he wanted. Mr. Jenkins nodded firmly. Henry anticipated every possibility. He wasn't senile, and he wasn't deceived. He chose Luella. Gasps rippled through the room. For the first time, Vivian's mask cracked. Her face turned pale, then red. You think this changes anything? She spat, pointing at me. She may have the paper, but I have the house, the money, and the influence. Without me, she's nothing. Mr. Harrison's calm voice cut through her rant. Actually, Mrs. Thompson, there is more. He placed a sealed envelope on the table and slid it towards the center. 3 weeks before his passing, Henry Thompson added a conditional clause. Vivian froze. Her eyes narrowed. What clause? Mr. Harrison opened the folder and said deliberately, If my wife, Vivian Thompson, attempts to force my granddaughter, Luella Thompson, out of the family estate within 1 year of my death, then all assets previously granted to her, including the mansion, vehicles, and bank accounts, shall be revoked and transferred to Luella Thompson in full. The words hit the room like a bomb. For a moment, no one moved. Then Vivian let out a high-pitched, shaky laugh. No court will honor such nonsense. Mr. Harrison leaned back unfazed. Conditional bequests are entirely legal. This clause was witnessed, notarized, and recorded. He pressed a button, and the monitor on the wall flickered to life. Grandpa appeared on the screen. He looked thinner than I remembered, but his eyes were still fierce.
His voice filled the room.
Vivian, if you're watching this, it means you've betrayed both me and Luella. I know your heart. It values wealth more than love. That's why I gave Luella not only half of Thompson Enterprises, but also the right to claim everything if you proved me right. Tears blurred my vision. He turned his gaze to me. Luella, you are my true heir. Carry my values, dignity, strength, and compassion. If she casts you out, the estate is yours. She has no place in a legacy built on love. The screen went black. Vivian staggered, gripping the table. You can't do this, she shrieked. I am his wife. This fortune is mine. I rose slowly, my voice steady despite the storm inside me.
No.
It was never yours. It was his, and now it's mine. The weeks that followed were a blur of court hearings and legal battles. Vivian hired a team of lawyers, all determined to take away my inheritance. They accused me of fraud, undue influence, and even questioned Grandpa's mental capacity in his final months. Each time, I sat at the plaintiff's table, my stomach in knots, as their words painted me as a manipulative granddaughter. But Mr. Harrison was unshakable. With each accusation, he calmly presented the facts and called on witnesses. Mr. Jenkins described Grandpa's clarity while drafting the will, and Mrs. Harris recounted the night Vivian tried to throw me out. Doctors testified that Grandpa was of sound mind until the very end. And then, the video was played in court again. Grandpa's voice, though weaker, still carried the same authority. If Vivian forces Luella out, let this record show I anticipated her cruelty. Luella is my heir, not by pity, but by choice. The courtroom fell silent. Even Vivian's lawyers shifted uneasily. I watched as the truth hit Vivian again. Her lips trembled, and her eyes darted desperately to her attorneys, but there was nothing they could do. She stood up abruptly and pointed at me. She tricked him. She cried, her voice breaking. She poisoned his mind against me. I found my voice, steady and clear. No, Vivian. You poisoned yourself. Grandpa saw who you were. He gave you every chance to love him for who he was, not for what he owned. And you failed. The judge's gavel struck, and the decision was made. I was the rightful heir to Grandpa's entire estate. A week later, I stood in the grand foyer of the mansion on Elmwood Lane. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the marble floor. My suitcase was by the door, not because I was leaving, but because I was coming home. Vivian passed me on her way out, dragging her designer luggage with shaking hands. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered her cruelty at the cemetery and the night she threw me out. Pity had no place here, justice did. When the last of her footsteps faded, I turned the key in the lock and whispered into the quiet halls, "I'm home, Grandpa." That night, I went into his study. His chair was empty, but his books still carried the faint scent of cedar. On the desk, neatly polished, was his gold watch. I slipped it onto my wrist. The weight felt like his hand on my shoulder, guiding me. Outside, the city lights sparkled, full of possibilities. For the first time since he'd gone, I felt not only his absence, but also his presence. His legacy wasn't just the fortune, the company, or the house. It was me, and I was ready to carry it forward with dignity, strength, and love. The first few weeks of owning Grandpa's empire were surreal. Reporters camped outside the gates, and tabloids wrote stories about the forgotten granddaughter turned heiress. The board of Thompson Enterprises watched me with wary eyes. Some doubted me, others resented me, but they all underestimated me. I walked into the boardroom, carrying not just my name but also the lessons Grandpa had taught me. Integrity before appearance, wisdom before power, and responsibility before greed. When the chairman asked if I intended to sell my shares, I smiled and said, "No, I intend to lead," just as he prepared.